wondered, like, what really goes on behind the scenes with university hiring?
Yeah.
It feels like such a black box.
Right.
Well, today we are diving deep into a paper
Okay.
that was presented at a conference in Australia,
Interesting.
the Asolite Conference.
Okay.
It's all about bias in academic recruitment. And I gotta say, some of the findings are pretty unsettling.
Well, it's interesting because it's not just like a theoretical study. You
Right,
know,
right.
it's based on like actual experiences of academics
Yeah, it gets
who are navigating this system.
real
Yeah.
pretty fast.
Yeah.
Like the paper tackles issues, like how your perceived fit
Right.
your age, even your name or photo could be impacting your chances
Wow.
without you even realizing it.
And this paper focuses on Australian universities.
Yeah.
But the issues it uncovers,
Yeah.
I think, have implications for academia globally.
Yeah, for sure.
These biases, often operating under the surface,
Right.
can create real barriers for talented individuals.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Okay.
So the paper emphasizes student diversity
Okay.
and its reflection on the selection of academics.
Got it.
So we know having a diverse student body is important.
Of course.
But this paper kind of takes it a step further,
It does.
doesn't it?
Absolutely.
I'd
While
say-
student diversity has been a focus for some time,
Yeah.
this paper shines a light on the equally critical need
Okay.
for diversity among teaching staff.
Interesting.
It argues that if you truly want to create an inclusive learning environment for all students,
Yeah.
you need diverse voices and perspectives,
Right.
shaping the curriculum and mentoring the next generation.
Makes sense.
For instance, Campbell, back in 2000, argued that a culturally diverse teaching team
Okay.
is absolutely essential
Wow.
for effectively educating a diverse society.
Interesting.
And Murray, in 2016, emphasized how important it is for teaching staff to reflect the diverse linguistic and cultural values of their students.
That makes me wonder about, like, the composition of those doing the hiring.
Like the research delves into whether the cultural, racial, and gender identity
Right.
of both candidates and selection panels
Yeah.
actually influences who gets hired.
And that's a question that often makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah, I can see that.
But this paper brings it out into the open.
Good. Before we get into like the nitty-gritty of the findings,
Okay.
can we talk about the concept of bias?
Sure.
Like we hear about, implicit and explicit bias, but what do those terms really mean
Good point.
in the context of academia?
So explicit bias is pretty straightforward.
Go.
It's that conscious prejudice,
Right.
the outright belief that one group is better than another.
Uh-huh.
You can see it in, like, discriminatory statements or actions.
Got it.
But implicit bias, that's the tricky one.
Yeah.
These are unconscious prejudices that we've internalized
Oh, wow.
from societal norms,
Right.
and they can affect our judgments without us even knowing it.
So it's kind of like scary to think about that.
It is. Like, we could be dismissing a candidate because they don't fit the image we have in our head of a professor
Yeah.
without ever realizing that that image is based on some unconscious bias.
It's a sobering reality. And it highlights why being aware of implicit bias is so crucial in academia.
Wow.
Imagine being a highly qualified candidate,
Right.
pouring your heart into applications and repeatedly getting rejected
Yeah.
without understanding why.
And the paper really highlights how disheartening that can be.
It is.
In fact, a staggering 81%
Wow.
of the unsuccessful candidates in this study actually sought feedback on their applications.
Really?
Like, that tells you something right there,
It does.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's like they knew something wasn't quite right.
Exactly. And of those who did receive feedback, nearly 3/4
Oh,
felt they had been discriminated against.
that's a huge red flag.
It is.
That's not just a few isolated incidents.
Right.
This points to a potentially systemic issue.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive into the specific types of bias that this research uncovered.
Right.
One of the major complaints
Yeah.
was a lack of detailed feedback.
Imagine putting in all that effort
Oh, yeah.
on an application
Totally.
only to be met with a generic rejection email.
The worst.
It's incredibly frustrating and leaves candidates feeling lost and confused.
And without constructive feedback,
Yeah.
how can anyone learn and improve?
Right. It just reinforces that sense that something else might be at play,
Right.
especially when you consider how many candidates felt discriminated against.
Exactly. Another big issue the paper highlighted was this perception of lack of fit.
Yeah.
Candidates felt judged based on personal attributes like race or age rather than their qualifications.
Right.
One participant actually shared their suspicion that another candidate was chosen.
Wow.
Simply for having been with the university longer, despite having a weaker publication record.
This notion of fit is so subjective and can easily become a breeding ground for implicit bias. It can lead to selection panels, consciously or unconsciously, favoring candidates who mirror their own backgrounds.
And that brings us to the whole mates club mentality.
Oh, yeah.
The research revealed a concerning sentiment that personal connections often trumped merit in the hiring process.
It's so true.
One participant even went so far as to say, academia is a mates club.
Wow.
Selection is not on merit unless the panel knows nothing about the candidates.
That quote really gets to the heart of the problem.
It does.
It's that sense that some positions are predetermined for people within a specific network, regardless of whether they're the most qualified.
It's like that old saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Exactly. And while networking is important, when it overshadows actual merit, it creates a system that's unfair and ultimately harms the quality of research and teaching.
This whole discussion has me thinking about all the times I've felt discouraged from even applying for academic positions. It's like you sense a certain type is preferred. And you just know it's not even worth the effort.
That's called self-discrimination.
Oh, wow.
Candidates anticipating potential biases decide not to apply at all.
So the biases, whether real or perceived, actually end up limiting the pool of applicants.
Exactly.
And that just perpetuates the lack of diversity.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, making systemic change even more crucial.
And it's not just about, you know, big obvious things. The paper included a quote from a recruitment expert who warned candidates that even seemingly innocuous details, like your name, photo age, and birth country, could play a role in the selection process.
That's why we need to be so mindful, not only of our own biases, but also of how we might be inadvertently feeding into the biases of others.
Okay, so we've painted a pretty bleak picture so far.
We have.
But surely there are solutions.
There are.
Right? Like, what can we do to address these issues and create a more equitable system?
That's the question we'll be tackling next.
Okay.
The research actually offers some potential solutions.
Good.
Many of which came directly from the participants.
Interesting.
Who experienced these biases firsthand.
Okay, let's dive into those solutions and see if they offer a glimmer of hope for a less biased academic landscape.
Absolutely. While these problems might seem insurmountable, there are concrete steps we can take to create a more just and equitable system.
I love that.
And that's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Perfect. Can't wait.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've uncovered some pretty disheartening realities about bias in academic hiring. Like, it's clear that this isn't just a few bad apples, right? This is like a potentially systemic problem.
It is. And what's really fascinating is that the research goes beyond just identifying the problem. It digs into, like, the why behind these biases.
Interesting.
Like, why do these patterns persist, even in environments that value objectivity and merit?
That's the question I keep coming back to. It's like, we can implement diversity training and transparent processes. But are we just treating the symptoms if we don't understand, like, the root cause?
Exactly. And that's where connecting this research to the bigger picture becomes crucial. You know, these findings about Australian universities really reflect broader societal biases that permeate so many aspects of our lives.
So it's like the university is a microcosm of society.
It is.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's a humbling realization for a sector that prides itself on intellectual rigor and fairness. And it raises a crucial question.
Okay, what's that?
How can academic institutions effectively address these issues when they're grappling with the same biases that plague society at large?
That is a paradox.
It is.
Like, we look to academia to be the leaders in knowledge and social progress. But they're facing the same human flaws and societal conditioning as everyone else.
Exactly. It underscores the need for a multifaceted approach. We need to address both individual biases and the systemic and institutional structures that perpetuate them.
Okay, so I'm seeing how these findings about academic hiring connect to these bigger issues. But, like, why should we, the listeners, care about what's happening in these ivory towers.
That's a great question.
How does this impact us?
Well, the impact of bias in academia goes far beyond just those directly affected by hiring practices. Think about it like it shapes the very knowledge being produced and valued.
Oh, wow.
If only a narrow range of voices and perspectives are represented, we limit the scope of research, we stifle innovation, and we risk perpetuating existing power structures.
So it's not just about fairness for the people applying for jobs.
No.
It's about the potential consequences for society as a whole.
It is.
Okay,
right. It affects everything from the research being done to the policies being shaped.
Okay, I'm convinced bias in academia is a big deal.
It is.
But it feels overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like, where do we even begin to tackle such an entrenched problem?
It can feel daunting.
It does.
But remember, even small steps can contribute to change.
Okay.
One of the most powerful things we can do is become aware of our own biases.
It's that classic idea of the unexamined life is not worth living.
Right. We can't change what we don't acknowledge.
Exactly. But how do we actually do that?
Start by reflecting on your own assumptions and prejudices.
Okay.
What stereotypes do you hold? Where do your blind spots lie?
Yeah.
What groups do you tend to favor or disfavor? And why?
It's not always comfortable to confront those parts of ourselves.
No, it's not.
But it's essential for becoming more conscious.
It is.
And intentional in our interactions.
Right. And once we've started that inner work, we can start challenging bias. In our own spheres of influence.
Got it.
Whether it's in our workplaces, our communities, or even our everyday conversations.
So it's about speaking up when we see discrimination.
Yes.
Advocating for more inclusive policies.
Yes.
And supporting organizations working towards a more equitable world.
Exactly. And remember, change doesn't happen overnight.
Oh, I know.
There will be setbacks and resistance.
Oh, sure.
But by consistently choosing to challenge bias and advocate for inclusivity, we contribute to a world where everyone can thrive.
I love that it feels empowering to know we all have a role to play.
You do.
Okay, so the research we've been discussing offers some concrete solutions.
Yes, it does.
For making academia more equitable. Can we delve into those?
Absolutely. Let's take a look at some of those strategies and see how we can put them into action.
So one of the key suggestions from the research participants was the need for more diverse selection panels.
It's a common sense approach.
It is.
Having a panel that reflects the diversity of the student body and the wider community can help mitigate bias.
Makes sense.
And ensure a fairer evaluation of candidates.
Yeah. If you have people from different backgrounds with different experiences and perspectives, you're less likely to have one dominant viewpoint driving the decision-making.
Exactly. Diversity on panels. Challenges assumptions. Exposes blind spots.
Oh, good.
And leads to a more nuanced assessment of candidates.
Another key suggestion was the need for greater transparency in the recruitment process.
Transparency is key. People want to understand how decisions are made. Candidates want to know the criteria being used. They want clear explanations for hiring choices. And they want to feel confident that the process is fair and unbiased.
Transparency builds trust.
It does.
And makes it more difficult for bias to operate unchecked.
Absolutely. And alongside transparency, there's the need for constructive feedback.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Candidates want more than just a generic rejection email. They want specific and actionable feedback.
It's about showing that the selection panel genuinely considered their application and is invested in their development, even if they weren't the right fit for that particular position.
And it gives candidates the information they need to improve their future applications and increase their chances of success.
The research also highlighted the importance of training to address unconscious bias.
Given how insidious implicit bias can be, this seems crucial.
Absolutely.
If people aren't even aware of their own biases, how can they address them?
Training can raise awareness, challenge assumptions, and provide the tools to make more objective and unbiased decisions.
It's about creating a culture of accountability, where people feel empowered to call out bias when they see it, in themselves and others.
But here's where it gets a little complicated. The research participants also expressed some skepticism.
Oh, really?
About whether these solutions are enough.
So even with all these great ideas, there's still doubt that real change is possible.
Some participants worried that deeply ingrained biases might resist training, and that even with diverse panels, unconscious bias could still creep into the decision-making.
It's hard to get rid of those unconscious biases.
It is.
There was a feeling that systemic change might be necessary. To truly address the problem.
It's like we're trying to fix a broken system with Band-Aids.
Yeah, one participant even questioned whether institutionalizing diversity initiatives might backfire.
In what way?
Leading to a complacency. Or a check-the-box mentality. Without addressing the underlying biases.
It's a thought-provoking point.
It is.
It highlights just how complex this issue is.
It does.
It's like there's no easy fix.
There isn't. It requires ongoing effort, critical reflection, and a willingness to challenge your own assumptions.
We've explored this issue of bias in academic, hiring its connections to bigger societal issues, and even some potential solutions. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with this feeling of cautious optimism. Is that even a thing?
That's an interesting way to put it, and honestly, I think it's a valid response.
Yeah.
This research doesn't offer easy answers. And that can be unsettling.
It is.
It highlights the complexity of the problem and the fact that there's no, magic bullet solution.
Yeah, the paper itself acknowledges some limitations of the proposed solutions. Can diversity training truly erase ingrained prejudice? Can we create a meritocracy in a system built on power and privilege? These questions kind of linger in my mind.
Those are some of the big challenging questions we have to keep asking. We can't pretend there are simple solutions, but that doesn't mean we should resign ourselves to the inevitability of bias.
So even if we can't completely eliminate bias, we can at least mitigate its impact, right? We can create systems that make it harder for those biases to influence decisions.
And that's where individual agency comes in. Yes, systemic change is critical. But we can't just sit around waiting for institutions to fix themselves. We all have a responsibility to challenge bias in our own spheres of influence.
So we can't be passive observers. We have to be active participants in creating change.
Exactly.
But what does that look like practically? What can we as individuals actually do?
Well, it starts with the awareness we talked about earlier. Recognizing our own biases. But it goes beyond that. We need to actively seek out diverse perspectives, challenge our own assumptions, and speak up against discrimination when we see it.
We need to move beyond simply saying we're allies and actually act like allies. Use our privilege to amplify marginalized voices, create opportunities for others, and work to dismantle systems of oppression.
And be willing to be uncomfortable, Have those difficult conversations, challenge the status quo, even when it's easier to stay silent.
That's a powerful reminder.
It is.
It's about recognizing that we all have agency.
Yes.
That our actions, no matter how small, can contribute to change.
Those small actions can create a ripple effect. Think about it. If each of us commits to challenging bias in our daily lives, imagine the collective impact we could have.
Okay, that's giving me a bit more of that cautious optimism.
Good. I like that.
So as we wrap up, I think it's important to acknowledge that there's no easy solution to the problem of bias in academia or anywhere else.
It's a complex issue that demands a sustained, multifaceted approach.
But we can't just shrug our shoulders and accept the status quo.
No, we can't.
This research has shown us that bias exists. It has real consequences.
Yes.
And we have a responsibility to address it.
We do.
We have to keep pushing for change, keep asking tough questions, and hold ourselves and our institutions accountable for creating a more just and equitable world.
I agree.
And we have to believe that change is possible.
We do.
It might not happen overnight, but with collective effort, intentionality, and a refusal to give up hope, we can create a future where bias is no longer a barrier.
Yes.
But a catalyst for positive change.
This research has given us a peek behind the curtain of academic hiring.
It has.
It's exposed uncomfortable truths.
Yeah.
And prompted us to confront difficult questions.
But it's also left us with a sense of hope.
Yes.
A roadmap for action and a reminder that we all have a role to play.
We do.
In shaping a better future.
So, dear listener, as you go forward with this newfound knowledge, we ask you, how will you, in your own unique way, contribute to dismantling bias and creating a more inclusive and equitable world?
What will your legacy be?